you facing the overwhelming stress of getting child support, or you're in the midst of a child support battle with your ex? Do you spend hours on hold with the child support agency and never seem to get a clear answer? Well, today's episode is going to be perfect for you. We have our special guest, Crystal Paduch from Child Support Consultants, who will be discussing 5 things she wished everybody knew about child support. Welcome, Mum, and welcome, Crystal.
Laura.
Hello,
Hi,
Laura.
Hi, Lynn.
Hello, Crystal.
Hi,
So
everyone.
just a quick reminder, everybody, we're not your lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. And Mum's not your lawyer, and Crystal's not your lawyer. So the information we're providing for you is just education. Please always go check with your lawyer or child support consultant before you make any decisions. And I'm going to introduce you, Crystal. I'm going to tell everybody a little bit about you real quick. So you were the founder and the driving force behind the Child Support Consultants. And you have got 14 years of being in this realm. And it started out when you were actually in child support and then moving into creating this agency that you've seen a need for because, like you've mentioned in your bio on your website, which is great. If anybody wants to check it out, we'll put the link in the show notes. It's emotionally charged and it's legally stressful. And so you saw a need to have like an intermediary between parents and the child support agency, which I think is amazing.
Thank you. Yes, me too.
Yes. So today we're going to talk about these 5 things you wish people knew.
Hello, I'm Laura Furiosi, divorced mother of 3, and I'm here with my mother, Lynette Galvin, with 35 years experience in family law. You're listening to the Divorce Course podcast. Through our candid discussions, we hope to help you through your divorce or de facto separation. We will be answering the most commonly asked questions and covering the stages and steps that you will face on your way to freedom.
Today, we're going to talk about these 5 things you wish people knew. And the number one is just understanding the process. We're not going into the nitty gritty because we've got so many things to talk about, but can you give us a brief overview of the process?
Yes, certainly. So depending on where you are through your separation, so if you're in the beginning stages of going through separation or divorce, then obviously you're going through a lot. There's a lot of aspects to that divorce and separation, which can be extremely stressful and difficult. Now, with child support, that can be a simple aside to everything else that you're going through, as long as you know what options are available to you and more so, I suppose, which option is best for you and your kids and your family circumstances. So really, there's 2 options. You can either have a child support agreement where both parents agree to the terms of child support and you set your own terms into a child support agreement. And the other option, the alternative, is to follow the child support assessment that is set by Services Australia Child Support via a formula. So that formula is determined by a number of things, but simply put, it's your incomes, the percentage of care that you have of the children, and other factors as well. So you might have other children from another relationship and such. So this is all put into a scientific formula, and that then generates an assessment rate about who will pay who what. So I guess the issue the system has, though, is that may not always be accurate or correct, or it may not always encompass everything that you need to support your particular circumstances and your children. For example, the incomes may not be correct in the assessment. This is a common issue. So child support use the information that comes across from the tax office. So when each party lodges their tax, that information flows through to child support and updates your assessment accordingly. Nice and simple, nice and clean for a lot of cases. For other people, not so much. So in some cases where people may be business owners, now they may legitimately be lodging their tax in a way that is correct and fair and legal as far as their accounting processes go and as far as the tax office is acceptable for the tax office, but it may not be appropriate for your child support assessment. Okay, so there are options that you can access administratively through the agency to have that corrected. And that's called departure application, but more simply known as a change of assessment or a COA, as most people would know it by. Now, there's 10 reasons that a person can apply for a departure or a change of assessment through the agency. And one of them, reason 8 is the most common, and that's in relation to incomes. So you can apply to have a review undertaken of your assessment. And it'd be other things as well. Your children may have special needs, or your children may go to private school. You may need to travel to see your kids and maybe high costs involved in that. You may have childcare costs. There could be a range of things. But you do have options within the agency. And it's just important to know that identifying which pathway is the best for you and in your situation, because it may be a change of assessment, or there may be an objection, and maybe lodge an income estimate. There may be an error made by the system where you just need to escalate within the agency to have corrected. But there are different options there for you.
Really, you have just literally summed it up in the best way I've ever heard. And this brings us on to topic 2 that you really want people to know about, is how to deal with the inconsistencies from child support calls. Because you've just said if there's an error or if there's a balance. We hear the story all the time, don't we, Mum? Oh, my ex just went overseas and skied in Aspen, but he's paying $20 a week in child support. So we get all these people who are really frustrated and they don't know what to do. So they ring child support. And there seems to be inconsistencies when, depending on who you speak to on the day. So what kind of information can you provide to anyone listening today who deals with that?
Yeah, and that's, I guess, really why I established my agency to start with, was to provide that clarity. That is what we do, is you can have a clarity call with us where we can sit with both of you if that's appropriate. If you don't have issues with having a meeting together, that's where I preferably like to do that, so you can both have the same information that is correct and accurate, so that sometimes that inconsistent advice can really cause unnecessary conflict in situations where parents may actually be quite amicable to begin with. And the agency can cause unnecessary conflict between them purely because they're getting different pieces of information that is not right, or one may be right and one is not. And then they're just going down a pathway, this battle that's just not correct. And so, yeah, that is a big issue.
When you have people that you're helping go through this, if they are doing some of the calls themselves, because I know you do some of that for them, do you give them any tips? Like, should they be writing down what's said, or, should they be recording things? Like, what should they be doing?
All the calls in the agency are recorded. So you always ask for a receipt number and the person's name that you spoke to. So every call is recorded and there is a receipt number attached to every call recording. Those call recordings can be released. So we do request those through Freedom of Information and review those calls on occasion where it is necessary, where there is conflicting information being given. And then we escalate that within the agency. So that is corrected. And it prevents future problems occurring. So we want to make sure that we're preventing things from occurring again. Now, it doesn't really change what's happened to this person necessarily, but it can help for future people. Now, what we find is that we know when we call on someone's behalf, we know when the information is not correct. And so we will spend a lot of time on calls being escalated to different departments till we get the right advice. Now, a person can do that. You can do that yourself, but it's difficult to know if what you're being told is not correct when you're being told this by someone who you believe to be giving you the right information. Sometimes they'll even go away and they'll seek further clarification from a senior officer, and they come back and you're still getting the same incorrect advice. So it's hard to identify when something's not correct. And that's the main problem. Most people know that in a government agency, there are escalation options. They do have, so they know that. But knowing whether what they're being told is correct or not is really the challenge in itself. But there are ways that there is, for example, if you're not sure, if you think that what you're being told may not be correct, or maybe you're just not understanding the way in which they're explaining an answer to you, they do have a department there called the Solutions Gateway Team, SGT. So they're not complaints, but there are more senior officers in that area where they can escalate you to that area so that they can clarify. It's like a second opinion on what the first person had said. So you can request to speak to them, or if not, you can ask go to step 2 complaints and just clarify with them. Now, the complaints team will provide you with a written explanation within 10 days, usually is their time frame to do that. So whenever I escalate a complaint, whenever it's necessary to escalate a complaint to that department, I always request it in writing, and they will provide that to you so that you can have a good explanation of why what has happened. And then you know what to do next. So if it was incorrect, if they do find there was an error, then you can escalate that to be corrected, or they will do that on your behalf. Or if an objection is required because there was not necessarily an error that has been made, but you do have objection rights to that decision. They may not have followed proper process, but now it's too late. So you have to object. You can object, and you can subsequently appeal to the Administrative Review Tribunal as well.
I love what you said about getting receipts for phone calls, because I was a lawyer when the child support agency first started, and they had the family lawyers up to have a look through your premises. Can you imagine that happening now? They've modestly covered their screen so we didn't get any inside information, but it was all in writing those days. And I felt that when we switched to telephone, I think there was more ambiguity and more misunderstandings. So I often say to my clients, I don't know if it's the right. I used to say, look, right in this time.
Yes.
You can't ignore a
Yeah,
letter.
and that's good advice. Look, the phone system now, I think, may even be better because it's not about someone just denying that they said something or denying something happened, because it is all recorded. It is all recorded. Just get that receipt number. So, because every call has a receipt number and they can review that, and they do review those. And yeah, that is really good advice.
Brilliant. Now, Mum, this is your bugbear and you bang on about it all the time. And this is something that Chris wants everybody to know.
Oh, really?
And it's getting rid of child support guilt. So, like, we hear it so many times, don't we, Mum, where people are just like, oh, look, I don't really want to go for child support because I'm trying to be good and have an amicable relationship with my ex and I don't want to rock the boat. And Mum, you are always like, think the children. So what do you say, Crystal? What are your thoughts here? And then Mum, I'll hear your thoughts.
Oh, I love you, Lynn. That is spot on. That is something that we have a no guilt policy here, because I do not want to hear the words, I'm trying not to be greedy or anything, but I don't know. Like, there's no guilt in child support. You're supporting your children. What you're doing is you're the voice for your children. The financial support that you're seeking is on behalf of your children, because they are financially dependent on both of you as parents. You're not financially dependent on the other party. So don't be guilted into thinking that you're being financially dependent on them after separation because you're seeking child support. It is your children that have the right to financial support from both their parents in line with their capacity to do. And you're speaking on their behalf and you are acting on their behalf. It is not greed. It is not guilty. It is for your kids. Now, child support, and I say this all the time, you are supporting your kids well before separation. It just has a name after separation. Child support has always been there before you separated. And then after separation, it has a name attached to it because it has to be identified as what it is, because it does need to be separated from the financial support for you and then the financial support for your kids, because now you're separated. It's just for your kids. I don't know what else to say about that.
Also, Crystal, so many times people, I guess, pressured into keeping the child support in a separate account. I'm saving it for the children. And I bang on about that a lot as well, because it's true, isn't it? It's there, not just for them when they grow up or for things that are identifiably theirs, but the house, the electricity. And I always say, if you've got kids, you don't have the option to do all your traveling on a motorbike and live in a caravan, really, or tent.
Yeah, unfortunately, in the world of TikTok and Instagram, we get a lot of hate from people and a lot of people going, oh, how dare you ask for child support? You know, you should just get a job, blah, 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 blah. And I know there's a lot of child support shaming going on by internet trolls. But like both of these amazing ladies have said, it's for your kids. You were doing it before you broke up. Why all of a sudden do you stop?
That's right. And it's a lot less, actually, after you separate. Because if you actually sit down, and I say this really because I do this with people who actually come together, and there's some people who generally just don't know how much kids cost. They actually don't. They come after separation. There's one parent who's always been in charge of maintaining the children, so they actually don't know how much it costs them for nappies and all those sorts of things, but also just the day-to-day bills of the household. And so when we actually go through, when we're working out maybe a child support agreement for them, we look at the facts, the numbers, and we punch those numbers and we show them how much they've actually been spending while they're together on the kids. So they can actually see that what they're actually asking for from the agency is actually not sufficient, to be honest. It's actually not sufficient to cover what you were doing previously. And about child support, it's not about saying, well, kids don't cost that much. Some kids cost different amounts because they have different lifestyles. They live in different areas. They are accustomed to different things, and they should not have to change what their lifestyle is after separation, if at all possible. I mean, in everyone's family situation, separated or not, there sometimes does need to be adjustments made if there are, genuine financial, changes to people's circumstances. But generally speaking, they shouldn't have to be uprooted from their schools or uprooted from the areas that they live and not be able to play in that sport or participate in whatever it was they were before. So ideally, it's about keeping things consistent so things aren't so difficult for the kids after separation, I suppose. They shouldn't have to miss out on things.
Now, let's get on to the fourth thing you really wish people knew, and that is don't listen to other people's stories and assume that's going to be the outcome of what your child might look like. So
Yeah.
can you talk little bit around that?
Yeah. I mean, look, after separation, it is important that people have a support network of friends and family and community, but don't let their story be your narrative, because your story, your new chapter is just beginning now. You don't know what it's going to be, and you need to approach it from your own circumstances, because of course, they're all well-meaning. If they're your friends and your family and they're supporting you, they're not trying to lead you down the wrong path. It's nothing they're intentionally doing, but you may end up on the wrong path if you're following their path and not creating your own. It's really important to get the information and the advice that's specific for you and your kids, because genuinely, like we just spoke about, genuinely speaking, that family's child support may not need to be that much because of their lifestyle and what their kids do and things like that. But it doesn't mean that your kids don't. It's just different because your circumstances are different. The parents' financial stage circumstances are different. What the kids are accustomed to doing and their lifestyles are different. So don't follow someone else's path, no matter how well-meaning they are. This is your chapter, this is your story, and you need to create that own narrative for yourself and your kids, because otherwise you may find yourself in situations that are just not ideal, and they could be actually detrimental to you and your kids if you're following a path of somebody else's rather than your own.
Couldn't have said better myself. Mum, any points there before we get on to the meaty one?
No, I think you're absolutely right. And kids cost different prices depending. Remember, they used to divide them into ages to work out the cost of children. We used to have a chart. And yes, it does depend. And I wish that people would realise that. And I think a lot of people, particularly Australian women, are quite strong, and they tend to not want spousal maintenance much. And they also are a little bit proud when it comes to child support. So it might not just be guilt, it might be a little bit of pride as well. But yes, kids are expensive, and they're going to keep on being expensive. So
what are we eating ourselves there? Let's get into the meatiest one. And this is the fifth thing. We hear this a lot, and that's dealing with an ex who was maybe coercively controlling or financially abusive in your relationship. You've left them. You're like, yes, thank goodness I've moved on with my life. I'll just get child support to do the collection. And then all of a sudden you hear these stories where all of a sudden this brain surgeon now only makes $20 a week, or their business collapsed and now they just work at McDonald's, or they're choosing not to work. They've decided to take a mental health year. So there's all these kind of little tricks and things that people come up against, and they get to a point, like we had a lady just the other day said she's been sent all this paperwork from child support and she just wants to give up. And there seems to be this overwhelming sense of constant battling. So a lot of these people who've finally got out now feel overwhelmed and drowning in paperwork and battles. Like you said at the beginning, Crystal, they're fighting the legal side. They don't really have the energy or want to fight this child support side as well. So what kind of things can people do when their ex is being like dodgy and dropping their wages, as an example?
Yeah. And I was listening to one of your podcasts recently about this in relation to the court system. And you're right, because what happens is after that battle is done essentially with the court system, the only thing left is the child support system. So that is why they are then moving from the abuse when they were together to the court system after separation, and then to the child support system moving forward, because that could be a really long time, depending on how old your kids are. You could be looking at 18 years of this. And people do, and you're right, people do get overwhelmed with the abundance of, I guess, they're just being bombarded with this constant engagement from the agency that's being initiated by the other party, or just the avoidance of child support and incorrect information being reported to the child support agency. Or dragging them through endless processes that are baseless processes. I mean, we talked about departure applications and objections and things like that are legitimate and need to be done. But there are people who actually use those processes to constantly engage the other party for no reason. There's nothing wrong with the assessment. It's not incorrect. They just use that to engage the other party and put them through that process because there's nothing else left for them. They've gone from being together in an abusive relationship to using the court system to now just using the child support system. But it's not all doom and gloom, because there are things that can be done. It's just about knowing what can be done and how, and having someone by your side sometimes for that too. So in relation to the way the system's used, we do a lot of talk about this because this is very common. There's three main reasons and three main behaviors that we find. And there's the avoider, the person who avoids child support. And they're the people who have those large debts and they believe they're untouchable by the agency and the child support can't collect it for them. And then you've got the fraudulent people, the fraudsters who are constantly engaging with the agency. They're not avoiding the agency. They're the real cocky ones, actually. They're the ones who are constantly contacting the agency. They're providing fraudulent information to the agency to minimize their incomes and minimize their obligations to support their children. And then you've got, or even care changes, because obviously the formula, the main things that encompass the formula and determine who pays who what is the incomes that are used in the care percentages. So they use those two things to provide fraudulent information to the agency to minimize their obligations. And I will also say that it's not just them that are in that fraudulent behavior. They have a support network of fraudulent supporters as well. They could be employers, they could be family, they could be friends, and they support them in this. And they provide evidence to support them through those processes. And it is a tiresome and invasive and exhausting process for the other party to continually have to prove, for example, that they have the kids in their house. And so they're having to get evidence from people. And it's really hard because how do you go knock on your neighbour's door and just ask them do you mind writing a statement to say my kids live here? Or do you mind going to the school and asking the teacher? Like, it's embarrassing for people to do that. But this is what the agency is saying. You need to keep a care record. So keep a calendar. That's good advice, actually. I would suggest that everyone do keep a care calendar of when the kids are staying overnight with you, just to avoid in the future, if there is evidence needed. It's really annoying that you have to do that with your own kids, but do it though, because that could be the safeguard that you need. But yeah, having to go through those processes is really difficult for a lot of people, and they just find it overwhelming after a while. They might battle it for a year or the first 2-3 years, but after a while, they're just on with it and they just throw their hands up and they just accept that they're not getting child support or whatever it might be, and they just disengage altogether, and then their kids are missing out ultimately, but they just can't cope with that. So we help people with that sort of thing. So that's really a big part of what we do. And you did touch on a little bit before about getting a bit of hate from people. We sometimes get that too, where people will make comments that we're one-sided when we speak about child support or we're biased. Look, I'll unapologetically say that I am one-sided, and we should all be, because I'm on the child side. If you are a parent who's trying to do what's best for your child, then I'm on your side. And everybody should be on that person's side, because there really is only one side when it comes to child support, and that is the side of the child. And so I'm unapologetic when I say that, because that really is important, that it's not about a battle against the other person or anything like that. This is about trying to do what's best for the children. And that's why we do what we do, to get the outcomes we do for the kids.
Oh, wow. I love that. I'm on the side. And that's great. But Mum, when it comes to this kind of manipulating and doing all this horrible kind of stuff, which looks like legal abuse, basically post-separation, people are still in the court. Can they tell the court, the judge, that this is going on in child support? Like, they've brought all these applications on all these things they have to do. So that is something that they could present to the family court.
If you're separated or about to be and you need to get everything finalised and sorted but you don't know what to do next, or you're looking for a way to do your own divorce and settlement without spending thousands of dollars on lawyer, then you already know what you need to do, and that is to sign up and become a member of the DIY Divorce Blueprint. Empower, educate and equip yourself with the legal know-how and the tools you need to get divorced or de facto separated and finally settle. Work through this course at your own pace without feeling confused, lost, scared or overwhelmed of all the family law legal jargon and processes. Let us walk with you through this journey and show you a better way.
And doing all this horrible kind of stuff, which looks like legal abuse, basically post-separation, people are still in the court. Can they tell the court, the judge, that this is going on in child support? Like, they've brought all these applications on all these things they have to do. So that is something that they could present to the family court?
Yes, and the court looks at the extent to which a person is stepping up to pay child support and to support the children. So yes, you'll often see that. You'll often see one person's affidavit attach a statement of the debt, and then the other person will pay the child support the day before court. And that's a red flag. And picking up on what you were saying, Crystal, about how exhausted people get with this, the manipulation and the lies, I would say, start right from the beginning, from the first time they go to mediation or to court, because I wonder if you think that because the Law Reform Commission was told that the financial side of with child support and an enhanced property settlement was a driver for a lot of people seeking extra time with the children that they wouldn't normally want.
It does. I do see that because, and we have a lot of like our clients who will say to us, look, he doesn't even want to see the kids. It's just because that they might even be getting that advice from their lawyer because they may not even know themselves about the care brackets and what affects what with the child support assessment. But most lawyers would know that. And so they're seeking that extra time for the wrong reasons. Now, it's all well and good that if you want more care of access to your kids, then that's great. But it has to be for the right reasons. And I guess also thinking about, and we talk about this a little bit too, was that how things were when you were together? Did you always have 50-50 care when you're in the same house? Because how are they even going to do that if they've never done it in the last 10, 15 years? Why all of a sudden now do they think they can actually do that? Because if you've always been the primary carer in your household, then why would that not continue now after you're separated? Because it just seems like that's going to be a major disruption for your children to just change that pattern. But that's out of my scope, but just my observation. It just seems odd. But yes, people do seek extra care in parenting orders and parenting plans and things like that, purely because of the impact that it might have on a child support assessment.
Yes.
Yeah.
And on their property assessment as well. Property percentages. It's awful, but we have seen a lot of it. I don't suppose it's really going to stop, but we can just educate people, can't we? Educate our people. And like you said, focus on the kids because it's for the children's benefit, this child support. And so I understand why they're so exhausted because it's been a long time.
A lot of people see child as not having any teeth. Like family court's scary, civil court probably scary, but they're like child support, no big deal. So we get these people who are really cocky on social media saying, oh, you're never going to get $1 out of me. What can child support do if your ex or your co-parent who's supposed to be a decent co-parent isn't paying child support, but they've been assessed to pay a certain amount, but they're not paying it? Is there anything that child support can do to force payment?
Yeah, they do have certain collection measures, but you are right. The child support system is laughed at by a lot of people. So these avoiders that we spoke about, they openly, like you say, they openly go out there and they just laugh in the face of the system. And what a flex, by the way. They're not going to get a cent out of me for my kids. I mean, okay, like that's
proud of you.
You're so open about sharing that with the world. What a catch. But the agency does have certain measures they can take. The problem is there's always a but attached to it because they can garnish from someone's wages if you are employed as a salary and wage earner, or if you are a sole trader and you are contracting to a third party, an employee, they can garnish in that way as well. But they can't if you are a company or if you're being paid into a trust. They can't touch those accounts at all. They can garnish from a bank account. So they can go into your personal bank account and they can take money from it, but not if it's jointly owned with somebody else. So if you have that jointly owned with your partner, they can't even touch 50% of it, which I don't know, that blows my mind that they can't change the legislation in that way. Because if you're a 50% owner of an account, you should be able to take 50% of what's in it if that person owes money. But anyway, that's my opinion. So they can do that. They can put a departure prohibition order on someone, so a DPO, so they can prevent someone from leaving the country. If their debt at the moment is if their debt is over $2,000, so that's a reasonable sort of rule. Yeah. So they can do that, but the person can they will first contact that person to enter into a payment arrangement. So much like you said about the court system where they make that one payment before they go to court, they will make that one payment before they go overseas. But then you're back to square one when they get back. And so it's like this one hit that they get. So there's that. And then there's litigation. So they do have the power. The child support registrar can take a person to court to take litigation action against that person if the debt is $10,000 or more. However, there is criteria for that as well. They have to have assets in their name. They have to have something that they can identify as something they can litigate against in order to meet that criteria to go to court. That's why not many cases go. So there are certain things that the child support registrar can do to collect, but there's just a lot of red tape around those things. So really, the system, it's not all bad. There's things that they can do, but because these loopholes are so well known now, people know what to do to avoid. They know they can do all these things, and then they are untouchable. They can avoid, and they can get you'll never get a cent out of me type situation because they know all these loopholes. So it's about, I'd like to see the system just close those loopholes. They are aware of it. It is very well known. So the system knows, they know that the government knows that they have an issue with the system being used in a way that's abusive and financial abuse. But they're just not quite sure what to do about it. So there is a family law inquiry into the child support scheme that has been underway for quite some time. There's been recommendations put forward and some things have been picked up and there have been some small improvements along the way. And there are some things in the pipeline as well. But really, these things need to be closed up in relation to garnishing bank accounts and their ability to collect from paying parents that know how to avoid. If they can look at their legislative framework and work out a way that they can close up those loopholes a little bit, then people can't exploit loopholes that don't exist. So there's talk about the tax office taking over child support collection, and there's talk about this, that, and the other. But really what we need to see is, okay, so what's going to happen there? There's a lot of talk about the tax office has more power. Okay, what? We need to know what exactly they are going to do that the child support scheme doesn't already have the power to do, because they already have all these things. What is you're going to do there that they're not already doing there? Because I just don't see how passing a problem between government departments is solving anything unless there's actually something tangible that they can say, this is what we're going to do. Then someone needs to step up within the department that has the delegation to do that and make those changes.
I think, Crystal, they underestimate how massive a job it is to have child support run at all. And I'm glad you mentioned the tax, because that's been the most effective way that people get some of their child support arrears, is that the payer receives a tax return minus their child support debt. And that's been very useful. But I just think that
absolutely. And also because the court system is at the bottom of that tier as well. If someone lodges their tax return, the tax office will take it first. So if that person owes a debt to the tax office, they're taking it first. Centrelink are taking it second, and then there's child support down here, because these are the payments that the government. Whereas the child debt, that's your debt. It's not really cared about as much, in my view. But that is actually the actual tier that it goes through. They lodge their tax. The tax will have the first bite of that. And then it goes to Centrelink. If you have a debt there, they'll take it. And if there's anything left over, then you can have that. So a child support.
Was there a case where they found out that this guy wasn't paying child support? So they ordered, I'm sure it was just recent, that in the family court, they ordered this guy to pay a certain amount of money. I can't remember what the case.
Well, you mean where there's a lump sum paid, yes. Sometimes past behaviour is I always say, good indicator of future behaviour. So if you go to court and your ex has just paid their child support last night or hasn't paid it, then the court will take notice of that, and they will take into account the possibility, maybe even the likelihood, that you're not going to get any child support going forward, or that there's going to be these child support shenanigans by your ex for years. And they will give a greater share of the property pool. They won't say that it's for child support because it's usually just couched as one of the future needs of a person. Yeah, there's lots.
So I
lots
guess anybody who is struggling with that and they're still in court, the good thing would be to document all those non-payments or the last minute payments, and make sure you point out that there's going to be unlikelihood of getting any child support.
Yeah. Can I just say, they look at the future and say, oh, you're going to have the major care of the child if the care arrangements are like that. So you get an adjustment for that. But there is also to be a separate adjustment, an additional adjustment, if you're going to have the children without support or without proper support.
Okay, so let's quickly just run through those things just one more time. So we've talked about you need to understand the process, basically, and Crystal's explained it in a nutshell, but getting your head around the process, number one, is going to help you move through child support dramas. And number two, be aware you may get inconsistent information depending on who you're speaking to. So learn about that. Crystal talked about that. What was it that they can use?
They can, so if you're not sure, you can ask to speak with their Solutions Gateway team or their escalated complaints team if you feel that the information you're being provided is not correct, or you're not understanding what they're explaining to you, because sometimes they can speak in a way that can be very confusing for an everyday person trying to understand their child support assessment. So if you could just say, I don't understand what it is that you're telling me, I'd like to speak with the Solutions Gateway team, the SGT team, then they should pop you through there to have a further explanation.
Brilliant. Okay. And number 3, get rid of your child support guilt. We've talked about that. It's for your kids, not you. And number 4, don't listen to other people's stories. Your story is different because your kids are different. Your life is different. Everything's different. And number 5, there is going to be some of those nasty people that Crystal's talked about, the fraudsters and the avoiders, and the coercive control people, the manipulative controlling people who are going to think that they can take everybody for a ride. And it may be a bit of a harder battle for you, but there's still a way through that. So not to give up. So Crystal, the kind of people that come to you, are they usually in this, I'm just so over it?
Yeah.
And then you have the other ones that are just like, can you walk us through it from the start?
Yeah.
So if you've got the amicable people and the people who are just like, I'm over it. Could you just talk me through how you help them?
Yeah.
If I'm
Most people in that situation, they're usually over it. They've tried to do it themselves. They've battled with the agency for many years, and they're at that point where they're just over it, and they just keep coming at them. And so we help them with that, with the departure applications and making sure that their assessments are corrected to be what they should actually be. So yes, that's the main cohort of clients that we have, are the people who are really struggling with the system. We do have some that come on in the early stages that actually just want advice about what child support is. A lot of people who've never had to utilize government systems, Centrelink or child support. And so we guide them through what payments they may be eligible through Centrelink as well, because they may not have never had to use those resources, and then let them know about child support, what options are available. If you're amicable, let's sit down, let's have a chat about maybe having a child support agreement made up and explaining the system, what they can do, what they can't do, and realistic expectations of what to expect moving forward from them.
Brilliant. Isn't that great, Mum?
I think it's just absolutely wonderful, because people don't know, and they're often with everything they've got to deal with. That's like the next thing. And particularly if they're in an abusive relationship, they're more worried about safety, stability, rehousing maybe. And they do, I think people feel that if they start the child support process, all hell will break loose. You find people worried about the reaction of the other person.
Yeah, we do have a lot of those clients who say that as well. It's because there's such a negative vibe that's attached to child support, and there just shouldn't be. It really should be something that is a negative thing, because you shouldn't have to feel like this is something to be concerned or scared about doing. But yeah, just knowing there are options for you if you are really in a domestic violence situation where it is unsafe for you to take action through child support, then you can seek an exemption from Centrelink and speak with a social worker there as well. And it's always up to you as the person who's being affected or impacted by domestic violence. If you can seek an exemption from taking maintenance action from child support, but it is always, the ball's always in your court. So if at any time you feel like, okay, I'm okay now, even with the exemption, you can apply to child support and say, look, I want you to collect child support now. Exemption, I know you have to wrap it up, but just really quickly, Centrelink, your family tax benefit assessment is impacted by the child support assessment. So when I'm talking about an exemption, what that means is your family tax benefit payment will not be affected or impacted by you not having a child support assessment in place. Part of that family law inquiry, I'm hoping, detaches the two, because it is a big problem with the system at the moment.
Yes.
But I just wanted to quickly just throw that in there.
It sounds like we just need to call the Prime Minister of Australia and tell him how to things.
Get him on the phone, plug it in. We could talk to you again, Crystal, too. I think this is so
I'd actually really like
you,
you, Crystal, to come along to one of our member Q&As, because I think people would have a lot of questions for you.
I'd love to do that.
And maybe do a deep dive into some of the other issues, because we've really just done a quick brush over everything. If anybody wanted to get in contact with you, Crystal, or anybody in your consultancy, how's best to communicate with you?
Jump on our website. So you can book in a 15-minute free phone call. If you're not really sure, that's the best way to start. If you know that you want to have clarity, book in the 1-hour Zoom. And that's probably the two options to start with.
Brilliant. All right, Mum, and any last wise words before we go?
No, I'm just so glad there's people like you, Crystal, that are there to help our people, because, we hear so many stories. But it does make my blood boil that one of the options for an abused person is to not
I know.
collect from their ex. So they get the benefit of their
That's why I
abuse,
say the
but
ball's
still,
always in your
but
court.
look,
You don't have, if you need to have it in place for a certain
Yeah.
amount of time because of genuine safety issues, then do that. But you don't need to keep that in place forever because the other party does have an obligation that they should be providing. Yeah, it really does. That frustrates me as well. But that's their only answer. The government's only answer to
they-
domestic violence is just to not get child support. It's mind-blowing.
What stupid. And like anybody who's listening today, I don't know if you can tell over the sound or whether you're watching the video, but Crystal seems to have a heck of a lot of energy and she's come across so passionate. When I spoke to her on the phone, it took me like half an hour to get over it, how passionate she was. I was like, yay, somebody else cares. You've got no energy left because you've been sucked dry by some moron who's horrible to you. Then get Crystal in your corner and she'll be the energy you need. So I just see it as a great win for everybody. And holy moly, they better watch out for you coming, Crystal, because there'll be people who'll be like, damn it,
Yes.
my little weasel ways don't work anymore. I can't thank you enough for sharing your wisdom today. And of course, I want to thank you always for sharing your wisdom as well. And hopefully we'll have you back on again soon, Crystal.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you,
Bye.
Crystal. Bye-bye, Laura. Bye, everyone.
If you found this podcast helpful, we'd love it if you could rate, review and subscribe. By doing so, you are spreading the word to help someone else just like you. Lynn would like to remind you that this podcast is general advice only and you should always get legal advice in relation to your particular situation. And remember that the Australian laws may have changed since recording.